guys, welcome to Driving to the Hoops Basketball Diaries. This is Clint, and doing some drill this weekend with the military. My opinions do not reflect anything on the military, just FYI. But headed home now, and just had some thoughts on the best point guards of all time. And I like to do it based on the era that they played in versus, just obviously, for example, Chris Paul, who is one of the best point guards of all time, by the way, would just destroy someone like Bob Cousy or something like that in a game, for example, if they were to play against each other. I'm aware of that. But when you look at how well Bob Cousy was in his era, and how much he was head and shoulders above his contemporaries, that's where the difference maker is. And that's why it's kind of hard to compare different eras. So kind of going chronologically, kind of like I did with the centers, on the best point guards of all time. Definitely, like I mentioned, Bob Cousy was the first great point guard. He's MVP. He's won several championships with the Celtics. This was a guy that he led the league in assists several times. He was a great scorer. He was actually up around 20 points a game some of his career. He just really was innovative in how he played basketball, especially back then. It was pretty, excuse the term, vanilla at the time. It was very kind of boring, and no one could really handle the ball that well, even the point guards who were supposed to be the best. But he had a lot of fancy passes. He had the IQ and the imagination to not only do a lot of that kind of street ball stuff, but he kept it entertaining and won a lot of games. He wasn't someone kind of like Maravich, who was he was a shooting guard really, but he was a great, passer and did a lot of fancy stuff, but he never was a winner. Bob Cousy was a winner, and he's one of the best at that. If you go a couple of years later, this one's kind of a gray area for me because I don't like using combo guards as pure point guards. That's kind of what I was wanting to go off of, is pure point guards. But the combo guards, they can kind of play shooting guard or point. And as far as I know, Oscar Robertson was a point guard for the most part. If he wasn't listed as such, he certainly played the role as such. He averaged a triple-double over a couple of seasons. He actually averaged a triple-double one season. Just a great scorer, great passer, good rebounder, had surprising lift. I've seen a video somewhere, it was on YouTube, and he didn't dunk it much, and if he could have, obviously, but he could come off 2 feet, and I've seen his elbow up on the rim. So this is someone that he was a lot more athletic than you think he was, especially back in the 60s and early 70s. Good scorer, good passer, was the all-time assist leader for a very long time. And then if you go a couple of years later, kind of in the 70s, the point guard position wasn't really the quote sexy position, but there was one great point guard who played for the Knicks, and I would say probably in the 70s he was probably the best. He come up big in the playoffs. He could score, he could pass. He was someone that was a great defender, great at steals, and that's Walt Frazier. Just a guy that put up good numbers, but also had a lot of success, especially early in his career. Coming up big, they talk about the Willis Reed game where he come out and hit a couple of shots against the Lakers in 1970. But it was actually Walt Frazier that really won that game when I think he had 36 and like some other gaudy numbers, probably close to a triple-double. I'd have to look into exact amounts, but just had a great game and closed the Lakers out in tremendous fashion. Winner, again, good defender. And on on the biggest stage at that time was the New York Knicks. There was a huge stage to play on in Madison Square Garden. He had that cool style. He almost kind of rhymed when he talked. He had like this flow about him when he would talk. It was almost poetic. Just a cool guy, you know. He's kind of known for being one of the cooler players. And then also in the 70s, you had the emergence of a great point guard named Nate Archibald. We've talked about him before. His nickname was Tiny Archibald. The only guy ever to lead the NBA in both assists and points, and that's just unheard of in the same season, might I add. An insane accomplishment for someone 6'1", 165 pounds. And the only knock on him really would be that, you know, a couple of things was that he didn't have a winning team at the beginning of his career when he was so dominant, and then he got injured and kind of floated around, and then he re-established himself as like a solid, you know, third option, fourth option kind of guy with the Celtics late in his career, and actually won a championship with the Celtics. And he was an integral part of that. He wasn't like some eighth guy off the bench. He was a starting point guard. He had some great games, and, you know, really was a great leader for that Celtic team. They had, you know, Bird and McHale, and even Robert Parrish was pretty young still. Robert Parrish seemed to be old his entire career, but anyway, so that was kind of the 70s. I mean, you had like some other good point guards, you know, Porter, I think his name's Terry Porter. He led the league in assists, and I like Donald Slick Watts. If you notice on my intro, the guy with the headband, he played for the Sonics. He was a good point guard. He just had a lot of cool style, and nickname was Slick. I just always liked his look. He had a great basketball look. Not necessarily the greatest player, but he was really good. You had a couple of other guys in there that were solid. And then in 1979, you had the emergence of, to me, is still the most dominant point guard of all time, and that's Earvin Magic Johnson. Led the league in assists, you know, several times. Almost every season he was in the NBA. Broke Oscar Robertson's assist record pretty quickly in his career. In about 10 or 11 seasons, he broke that record. If I'm not mistaken, he still has the highest career assists per game average. Now, maybe there's some newer guys right now that hasn't. I haven't looked at that in a while. But and when you watch his highlights, they're still impressive today. It's a guy 6'8", 220, 230, and just, he was kind of LeBron before LeBron. I know LeBron scored more, is more dominant in a lot of ways, defensively particularly, but Magic could control a game really well. And, you know, as Kevin McHale said, that there's only two guys that could really control a game with 12 shots, by taking 12 shots, and Larry Bird, and then of course Magic Johnson. He could give you 20 points and 12 assists and 10 rebounds and just dominate a game just by taking 12 shots, and Magic was that guy. And when you're talking 3 MVPs and 5 championships, all the assist records that he had, and he just played 11 or 12 seasons, it's hard to imagine someone that dominant doing the things he did at that size, especially back then. Point guards were all little back then, but not Magic. And then during that time frame, there was 2 other point guards, and I'm talking old school. I know there's some great ones now, but Isaiah Thomas and John Stockton, both 6'1", pretty light frame. Stockton was a little thicker, maybe. He was known for his strength, for his size and that kind of thing. But Stockton, 2 different types of careers they had, but John Stockton was... So Stockton, with his assist records, you look at his longevity, the steals records, the assist records, playing on one team, that's something that's got to be taken into account. He was just such a dominant point guard in kind of a under the radar kind of way. I don't think he ever scored 40 points in a game in the NBA anyway. And he always said he was kind of self-deprecating in that way, that he would say, you know, I've never been the best player on any team I've played on. And there might be some truth to that, but he was kind of one of those players that just got better and better as he went along. I don't think he was a huge standout in high school. He was good. He wouldn't have went to college. And then same in college, he wasn't like dropping 50 on guys or nothing like that. He was just a ultimate point guard. Magic's the best, but Stockton is, in my opinion, and Magic too, is the most pure point guard that's ever played. Didn't make a ton of mistakes. The only knock would be that he played, about 20 seasons without any championships. Went to the finals twice, which is good, but no rings to show for. And then the other guy that came along a little before Stockton, but a little after Magic, was Isaiah Thomas. Kind of a skinnier frame player, but he could score a lot. Stockton was a guy Thomas was a guy that could score 50 points in a game. And he could also give you a lot of assists. I mean, he averaged up around 13, 14 assists one season. And, could give you 20 a game, 25 a game even. And he was a winner. Big thing, and he was one of my favorites growing up. I loved Isaiah Thomas when I was growing up. When he played against the Lakers, and I don't remember which game it was. I know it was the '88 finals, and he got injured, and he comes out and he scores 25 points in one quarter in the finals. They lose the game, but he was just on fire, hitting crazy shot after crazy shot. And just playing injured, I have a lot of respect for guys that'll do that. And then the next two seasons, in '89 and '90, they actually won the championship. And it was good for them. They, a lot of people didn't like Detroit. I'm not a huge Detroit fan because they were dirty, a lot of them. And Isaiah's had some personal issues and things that's come to light. But on the court, he was a guy you wanted on your team. And he could fill it up or he could dish it out. He was tough. He could play injured. He was super clutch. He had some games where he was a very clutch player that he helped win some games for the Detroit Pistons and was easily their leader and best player. And one of the best players to ever come out of Indiana University. And if I can jump back to Stockton, there was an interesting thing that Gary Payton said the toughest guy he ever played against was John Stockton. He said because you had to play him the full court, like you could not let off him. You knew what you were going to get from Jordan and other guys that were really dominant backcourt players that he guarded. But Stockton, I think, and I get what he's saying. I know he doesn't think he doesn't think Stockton was better than Jordan, but I think I understand what he means when he says that was the best player he played against and the toughest opponent he had is because it was so mentally and physically exhausting to play against John Stockton. You knew you were going to get 30, 40 from Jordan. There's just not a whole lot you could do about it. Whereas with Stockton, you're probably going to get 20, 15 assists against you, and probably he's going to get 4 steals against you and 6 or 7 rebounds, and he's just going to run you ragged, and that was the kind of player that Stockton was. He was just a tough player. He had big hands. But if I had to pick between those two, in all honesty, I would still take Isaiah Thomas between Stockton and Isaiah. So just some things there. Gary Payton is another player that come along, and then Jason Kidd in the 90s that took the point guard position to another level, and they were just really good overall players. They weren't quite what Isaiah, Magic, and Stockton was, but they were pretty darn close. And later, of course, Steve Nash, he was a two-time MVP. No matter how you feel about that, he is a two-time MVP. Not many point guards can say that. Only, at least back in the day, I know Magic and maybe Kuzi were two-time MVPs. As far as newer players, I don't know what they put Steph Curry as. He's kind of a combo guard in my opinion, but he might be a pure point guard too. So anyway, just some thoughts on point guards, and I'm glad you was able to listen in. And please don't forget to like the video. I'd love to see comments, and please subscribe too. We'll see you soon on the next video. Have a good weekend.